Today's passage, Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. Okay, let us read. Want to go? At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath, the duty in the temple, desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than passage. We learned about people's responses, people's reactions to Jesus' teaching. Now we are moving on to chapter 12. Chapter 12 is talking about kind of reactions of Pharisees to Jesus. So we can see lots of criticisms from them, confrontation from them against Jesus' Sabbath observation, his demon, exorcism, and then the miracle works. About all those things, those Pharisees were criticizing Jesus and his disciples. Now we are looking at this controversy on the Sabbath. Yeah? What happened at the time? Jesus and his disciples, they were passing through the grain fields. They were hungry. Maybe they couldn't have the time to have lunch. So his disciples were hungry. And then they saw all those heads of the grain. And then they picked some heads of grain and then they rubbed them. And then they ate it. And then Pharisees criticized that. You broke the law. What kind of law are they talking about? It's a fourth commandment in Decalogue. The 10 commandments we have, right? In the Old Testament. And then on the fourth commandment, God told them, you should not work on Sabbath day. Yeah, that is the fourth commandment. And then the Jews, they were observing that commandment really seriously, especially after the Babylonian exile, after they experienced that kind of tragedy. They were kind of captured from their homeland and then they were scattered all over the Gentile nations. So after that experience, they were kind of more obsessed about this observation of a Sabbath law. So they made 39 categories, okay? Because, the fourth commandment is only, you should not work on Sabbath day. What is the definition of work? Which means you should not do anything? As a human being, we need to breathe, we need to eat and drink, we need to stand up and then walk, and some kind of activities are involved. So what's the definition of a work which cannot be done on Sabbath? That's why they made detailed categories. It was 39 categories. And then they made each detailed, regulations, okay, belong to each categories, 39 categories. According to that regulations, It is permitted for you to kill lice on Sabbath, but killing fleas, it was prohibited. Can you guess why? Lice doesn't move that fast. So in order to kill it, I think you can push it like this. But catching the fleas is kind of different issue, isn't it? You need to move a lot to catch it. So that's why they taught the people, you can kill lice on Sabbath day, but not the fleas, something like that. So it sounds kind of ridiculous to us, but they were so serious. They wanted to observe the fourth commandment completely. So that's why they made all those details to observe that law. So now, in the eyes of these Pharisees, who were the leaders of the Jews, and then observing all those Mosaic laws completely, according to their claim, their own claims, they thought those disciples of Jesus, they broke the law. Yeah? They picked the heads of the grain. What does that mean? They actually harvested. And then they robbed the heads of the grain, which means you were threshing. So those activities were called harvesting and then threshing, which were prohibited to be done on Sabbath day, clearly. So that's why these Pharisees told them, you broke the law. And then now Jesus is talking about David's story in verse 3. Okay? This story appears in 1 Samuel chapter 21. What happened at the time? Yeah? David, he left Jonathan, and then he found that the King Saul, he was looking for David. In order to what? In order to give him a reward. Yes, kill him. So he fled with a few of his followers, but nobody wanted to receive David to their own house or to their own, city. Why? They were afraid of King Saul. So David could not go anywhere. He could not go to his hometown, Bethlehem, or he could not return to his own house, wife's house. Why? So all the soldiers of the King Saul were standing there to catch him. So he could not go anywhere. So he actually couldn't eat anything for 3 days by the time he arrived at this town of the priest Ahimelech. The city's name was Nob. And then the Ahimelech, the priest, he lived there. And then at the time, David and his people, they were starving. And then Ahimelech, he said, he welcomed them. But the thing is, he didn't have any other food except this bread of presence. What are those breads of presence? So according to God's law, the priests, they were preparing the 12 loaves of bread, and then they placed those bread in front of God inside the sanctuary. And then only the priests could eat those bread on Sabbath. But the thing is, when the David and his companions arrived there, they didn't have any other food except for that. And then what did he do? The Ahimelech, the priest, he gave those bread to David and his companions. According to the regulations, according to the rules, actually he was the lawbreaker. He was not supposed to give those bread to David and his followers. He broke the law. But the thing is, Ahimelech, the priest, he understood what was the divine intent when God ordered the priests to prepare those loaves inside of sanctuary. What was it? Those loaves were the symbols for God's presence in the sanctuary. God is there. And then those loaves of bread of presence, it symbolizes God's provision for his people. So those loaves were telling the people, I am here, your provider. And then I am providing the life for you, so do not worry about anything. true meaning of this showbread inside the sanctuary. And then the Ahimelech, the priest, he knew the true meaning of this bread. So instead of keeping those dead regulations, he followed God's will. He gave those bread happily to David and his companions. So what happened to him, David? At that time, David was desperate. Even though he was beloved by God, at that point in that situation, anybody, even David could doubt about God's love. God loves me, then why these kind of things are happening to me? Maybe he abandoned me. So that's how David felt at the time. But when Ahimelech the priest provided those breads to David, when David tasted the bread of God's presence, he could be restored. He could taste God's grace, always be with him. So David was restored by eating the bread, and then he could follow God's will continuously. So now Jesus is pointing out that what is the true meaning of Sabbath? Actually, Sabbath's true meaning is really similar with this meaning of present, the bread of presence. Okay? When was it started, the Sabbath? Actually, seventh day of creation. God created everything during 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he took rest. So what is the meaning of creation? Whole world was filled with darkness and death and disorder, but God came, God's light came, his order came, his life came in. So his life, light, his order began to rule over the world. So creation was accomplished, and then there was a true rest in that creation. So that's the meaning of the first, the Sabbath day, the seventh day of creation. But what happened next? Adam, he disobeyed God. He broke God's will. And then what happened? Darkness came back. Disorder came back. Death came back. So all those darkness, death, and disorder ruled over the earth again. But God didn't give up his own plan. He chose his own people, Abraham and his descendants, and then he gave the regulation, the rule of the Sabbath day to them. What is the point of a Sabbath day? What was God's commandment? You should not work on that day. Why? Why did God give this kind of rule? In order to make them to break the law so that he can punish them? No, I don't think that's his intention. Why did he give them that order? You should not work on Sabbath day. Because God wanted them to taste God's grace and his provision. People thought we can work, we can survive, we can eat because we work. We eat this bread so we can live. We work so hard so we could get money, we could get this grain so that we can survive. So they thought they live because they work. But God wanted them to know, no, that's not true. God is the source of life. God is the fountain of life. So Sabbath day is the confession of that faith. We live not because we work, but because you are the provider. And then Sabbath day is the expression of hope, okay? While they are taking the rest, or while they are enjoying the rest, they were waiting for the completion of creation at the end. They were waiting for the complete rest at the end of the world. At this time, at this moment, we can see lots of pains and darkness and then all those sufferings in the world, but God will restore, God will complete this creation, and then we will enjoy the complete rest. without any lackness, without any insufficiency, any suffering or death. So on Sabbath day, every week, they are envisioning that hope. So that's the meaning of Sabbath day. But now, Pharisees, look at that. That is actually human tendency, even including us. When we have those kind of rules or traditions or regulations, we are clinging to it. We are making those things as the means to elevate ourselves. By keeping all those regulations, by following all those rules and traditions, we think ourselves as a good people, righteous one. We are all right. That's exactly what did the Pharisees. They forgot. They lost the true meaning of the Sabbath. They were focusing on the regulations themselves, and they make these things as the means to elevate themselves. Think about it. What is the true meaning of Sabbath? It's the total dependence on God. Okay? Not those worldly things, not those grains or breads or money or things in this world make us live. No, that's not true. We are totally depending on you, God. That's the meaning of Sabbath. But you see, ironically, Pharisees making this method of humbleness, or this is expression of total dependence, which is the Sabbath. They're using it as the means to elevate themselves. The method of arrogance. Okay, let us come back to our passage, okay? So now we have two paths.